Ms. Davis.
Here.
Mr. Lee.
Yes.
And Ms. Payne.
Here.
Okay. First thing on the, or adjust the agenda here a little bit, is communications from the zoning inspection staff.
Okay, well, the first thing, you've got your reports. And the other thing, the one thing I did today, I need to tell you about, I did send a letter to Mark Troyer. He's got mortar falling off the north side of his building. I sent a letter telling him to contact within 10 days and let us know what his plan is to do that.
Which property?
What's your address?
133.
133 North Chillicothe. And then the other thing was, Mr. Lafayette and I met for 2 hours last week because I had several issues with this proposed maintenance code, and we went over them. I'm not sure if he was in agreement with all of them or most of them, but you want me to go through these?
Yeah, why don't you and Paul just kind of take us through the high points that you discussed.
Okay, I'm not sure when we did, but 118201 and chapter 1182, we took out that whole first paragraph, that whole first section.
That was good, definitions.
Was that?
Yeah, the definitions,
Yeah.
yeah.
We talked about
And I think we
that
took
last
that out of the
meeting.
previous meeting.
Okay. And also, at the end of all of these paragraphs, it has ordinance passed. We don't need that in there because this will be passed as one ordinance, and that's usually put in when you pass something new, that this whole thing will be new, and it will state that. Of course, I have some problem with that we don't do commercial buildings, even though we're trying to, on the maintenance of them. Then if you say you're deleting 118304, there are some things in there that aren't included in the code you're looking at. Basically, when it talks about motorhomes, trailers, and boats, non-private being parked in the driveway, we don't have anything that pertains to that.
I think we have, well, under 118204G, we talk about junk vehicles.
Yeah, that's under, it's under C, 118304C, motorhomes, trailers, and boats and non-private passenger vehicles that are parked on the driveway must be parked a minimum of 20 feet from the edge of the public right-of-way. We don't mention that at all in what the new stuff we have, anything about parking.
What section is it?
It's 118304C, 2C. And there might be others because, so it's my understanding that you want to eliminate all of the 118304.
Right, yes.
Okay. So I haven't read it and compared that way, but, on 118207, sidewalks, walkways, and driveways. Well, we have a sidewalk ordinance that's under the municipal code. Zoning doesn't take care of that. That would fall under the village administrator jurisdiction, and that's part of the codified ordinances.
I thought when we looked at that, I didn't think we could find exactly.
I think it was a little different.
Yeah, when we looked at 909, because it's under ordinance 909, I don't think we found exactly where it talked about maintenance.
Well, we talk about repairing or replacing sidewalks in 30 days. That's not a zoning issue.
Paul?
Yeah, I'm looking at it, I was looking at 905.
Because that should address the ORC, should.
Yeah, actually, it's not 905, it's
For
905.
maintenance of curb and gutters and sidewalk.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 905 to 909, excuse me.
Right, yeah, 909 gets more into the development, construction of permits, permitting and all that stuff. 905 is really the maintenance issues.
So we can just add in here that sidewalks, maintenance of sidewalks shall be in accordance with section 905.
Right.
And this will pertain to everything else, which is driveways, property lines.
Right.
I don't think we can tell them how long it can be replaced, that could be part of the zoning code. Because the only person now who can charge someone with replacing their sidewalk is the village administrator.
Should we just remove the last sentence of that section?
At least
Well, that's why we
how-
say, if we say that, put in here, the sidewalks out shall be repaired and
I
maintained.
can't hear you.
If we put in here sidewalks shall be repaired and maintained in accordance with section 905, that's what it addresses.
I don't have any problem with that.
Right.
Repeating.
And just keep it with that. And we'll carve sidewalks out of this.
Okay.
Why would you duplicate it?
That's that's why we're doing this.
I can't hear you.
That's why we're adjusting this, so it's not duplicated.
We're fixing it, so it doesn't.
Right, I'm just gonna do so I can just change the original.
Amber?
Okay, 118208, notice of violation, I think it should have, when any premises is in violation of, right now it reads this chapter, it should read of any section of.
And that was something, we had separate notices or separate violations in here, and I agreed with Annabelle that we need to have them consolidated into one violation provision.
That makes sense.
So you'll see, like, in this section, 118208, you have violations, non-compliance, remedies of the village. And then if you go into, let's see, if you go into the nuisance provisions, like weed and litter and all that stuff, under 1186, you have the enforcement provisions. So I think we need to consolidate those into one section for violations.
And further down in that same paragraph, it says, if you have an order to conform to this chapter with a certain number of days not to exceed 180. I think we should put a number in. We put a number in every place else, but unless, I don't know why it would be 180 days. That acts like it's referring back to the sidewalk, and then once again, I'm gonna say, not my problem as zoning inspector if it's 180 days.
I think the initial thought there was based on what the issue was in providing adequate time, because if it's replacing a square sidewalk, it's gonna take, okay, maybe a week. That's it.
But-
If somebody has a lot of major work to do on a building, they're gonna need more time.
I understand that point, but my point still remains that I don't believe it's a zoning issue.
With the sidewalks.
It's not.
Well, we're carving the sidewalks out.
Yeah.
We're gonna carve the sidewalks out entirely.
Okay, so then,
They're carved out because
That
we're just
whole
gonna
thing
put
is
sidewalks shall be
okay.
maintained in accordance with section 905.
so you're taking out that whole,
Well, steps, walks, and driveways, we're gonna take sidewalks out.
so then
Sidewalk
the
portion.
notice of violation will be gone in the correction of violation by the village? Because if it's a sidewalk.
Right,
I
but
hate
we're
to
not
keep saying
taking,
that.
we're not taking out 118207 as it drafted entirely, we're just carving out the
So removing the
sidewalks.
sidewalks, the sidewalk provision from that section.
Okay, so walkways and driveways.
Yeah, right,
All
right.
right.
And again, with, as far as the notices of violation and the corrections to violations, that'll fall under a single consolidated provision for all of this property maintenance code to include sidewalks and driveways and nuisances, and when you're talking about weeds and everything else.
Okay, well, down on to B, there's a sentence, the third sentence down, it starts upon the approval of village council. It should be the village administrator.
Right.
And we discussed that, I think that the last sentence is actually illegal. All expenses incurred shall, when approved by council, be paid out of any money in the treasury of the village not otherwise appropriated.
Yeah,
Well, number one, you can't spend money that's not gonna
Yeah,
appropriate.
we'd already
so-
addressed that. That
Right.
needs reviewed.
Yeah, okay. And then again, at 118209, it says, whenever any violation of this chapter is corrected by the village upon completion of the work, the village shall give 5 days' notice. The village, who? We can't say, we have to state.
so village administrator, village zoning
Well, if it's gonna
inspector,
involve liens and costs, then it's gonna be the village administrator.
or the fiscal officer, because she, well, I think the fiscal officer, we have to do all the leaning work and communication with the auditor, so.
It could be administrator, because it could be he could be his authorized representative. So-
Right. Either way.
Okay, page 7B. About the fourth line up from the bottom, we say such amounts as approved by the village council, it's a village, should be village administrator.
Right.
And 118211, I don't know if we took that whole A out before or not, but
You and
that's,
I were talking about removing that and inserting 113804, so we have the consistency on the.
and
appellate
because
division.
we're repeating ourselves, we already have a, sorry, Board of
1183.
Zoning Appeals,
1183.
It's already
I'm
stated
sorry,
there.
113804.
Yeah, we thought we could just say C 113804.
What's number 1138?
113804 is procedure for administrative appeal.
And it's exactly the same as what's in here.
Well, that's what we want to make it consistent so that this one wasn't different than this one, so we'll go refer back to this one.
Is that still the BZA?
Yes.
So is that the removal of A, B, and C in that, so 1182.11 will just say appeals, see section 113804?
Well, and I think, Annabelle, you and I were talking about leaving B in there.
Yes, 113804B.
So A and C will be removed then?
No, 113804B is a section that pertains to what we want them to read. It says the same thing that A does.
So you're just removing A?
The only thing I don't see is the 20-day limit.
That's under 113804B.
It is?
Yep.
Okay.
Appeal shall be taken within 20 calendar days after the decision.
Okay. That makes sense then.
So we can strike out that whole provision and just, appeals are governed by 113804.
Okay, on page 9, 118601, we have application of the chapter to be consistent. We would like to change that to purpose, which is how we used it in the rest of them. Now, 118603, I almost fell asleep reading. Curbing, walks, cesspools, and refuge. Well, a lot of this stuff is covered in our water and sewer regulations. That they can't dump things down,
But that doesn't contain to maintaining pertain to maintenance of it.
but that doesn't what?
Pertain to the maintenance of it.
No,
I mean, it pertains to discharges, but it doesn't pertain to.
yeah, how are we going to do that then too? How is the zoning inspector gonna inspect someone's septic
Well,
tank?
and I think that's where we come to the issue of, are we calling in, I mean, obviously, that's a county health department issue, and we have these rules in place, we call them in.
How would we even know?
It'd probably be the result of discharge, most likely.
Well, down in D, it says deposit of dead animals and about offal from a slaughterhouse. Well, we don't have any slaughterhouses, none are ever permitted in the village, so that's kind of, I think, words that we don't even need.
Okay.
And F, dumping of refuge in the village forbidden, well, I think that's another, something in the codified ordinance, but, yeah, I mean, if someone did do that, it wouldn't be the zoning inspector that would go after them, and it would either be the police department or the village administrator.
Probably need to look at the littering section,
Yeah.
see how that coincides with that, and then ensure everything that we want covered is covered in the littering section.
And we don't have a license to dump, and because we have no place for people to dump anyway.
So that section could be removed.
Yep.
I mean, somebody, if you would read this, I think they would think, oh, we could do this if we get a license.
Next section.
Pardon me?
Next section, please.
Okay, page 11G, draining slopes. That is under our water and sewer regulations, section 92504 of the codified ordinance.
924.
92504. Under 118602. Number 2. It says no person shall have charge or care of land on any ditches or culverts. None of them do. No private residence has any ditch or culvert they're responsible for. And I don't think we want them to.
042.
04 too.
Yeah, but we're changing, well, yeah. 1186-042. And under 2, yeah, it says no person, whether owner, lessee, agent, tenant, or other person having charge or care of the land in the village, which includes unimproved street right of way and any ditches and or culverts along the property, shall permit the litter to accumulate.
Okay. So what was the comment then?
Well, it says no person shall ever tend any of the ditches or culverts along the property. They don't have any ditches. Residents do not deal with ditches or culverts in the village. And if they were to dump trash in it, then that would be a police matter.
Right. So I think we just, as far as the ditches, culverts, we just put the general, make a reference to the general litter ordinance. And the one above that under C, to the extent that it's used in that chapter, where it says litter includes, we're just gonna cite to the actual definition of litter that we have in the other portion of the codified ordinance.
Yeah. So then under.
11, on page,
Annabelle, just a second, sorry. So then 118604B, where it says notice to cut weeds, remove litter. So we probably need to remove the litter provision, because that would be addressed in the litter section.
Right.
yeah, I'd like you to take some of what's in our 118304 and incorporate it into this, but that's gonna take some more studying to do. And we have to address the issue of posted trailers and driveways somewhere, and that's not addressed in this at all.
Well, we have it as far as under junk vehicles, we talk about it, but I think we can add something in that same section. Or not under junk vehicles, but under that same
Right, okay.
portion.
Ready? Okay, page 13, trimming of trees and shrubs. We actually thought we could delete that whole section because we have a chapter in the book about tree trimming, and here in the new thing, you have 8 feet, in our old thing, we have to have a clear height of 7 feet above the surface of sidewalks. I mean, this kind of basically says in the other section in the tree,
Trees are under 913.
yeah.
And 91301 covers, in our general ordinances, covers planting, trimming and preservation. But I think we need to look at it, make sure that we are covering, and to the extent we want it to stay in there, if we want to change anything that's in 913, we can do that too.
Yeah.
Property owners may plant trees within the right-of-way located adjacent to their property. Such trees, however, are subject to removal by the village in the case of a need to prevent nuisance in the right-of-way, to access utilities under or near. But I don't think it goes, I didn't see anything that talked about, maybe I got it. That talked about the actual heights in this section.
I mean, the clear height?
Yeah.
Well, in our code, we have 7 feet, it's under.
Is it under a district?
Here, I think it's 118708, street tree and public tree requirements, tree topping, height of limbs. Here we say 7 feet, and this, what you're talking about, you say 8 feet, 118708.
I remember having that discussion in the meeting and we were talking about the height of it.
I mean, it says the same thing there as it does in A, worded a little differently, but.
So we'll look at those sections together and see where it makes the most sense to have that
Okay.
language, if it's in 91301 or if it's in this section.
The only thing, 118606 animals, B, talk about setbacks. You talk about animals may not be located in front yard. Not be located in front yard or side street yard areas. I mean, okay, never mind, I reread that.
Oh, yeah, no. She's talking, yeah, under 1B. Where it says setbacks.
Oh, yeah, no animals shall be kept in required front yard or side yard. We don't allow anything in a side yard.
That's fine, I think it's okay to clarify it.
Which is good, so it shall be located behind.
You need what?
So I think it's okay to clarify it. I don't see an issue with that.
Actually, and actually it's a repeat of the first sentence, except you left out the word side yard. And under E, enclosures and fences, we would have to remind them they'd have to have a fence permit. If we're gonna tell them they got a fence in something, then they have to have a fence permit.
Under E,
Yes.
We have to put in the fence permit in accordance with.
And of course, bees, we have a whole other lot of information about that that I haven't really even looked at and compared to what is in here now, but
Yeah, you forwarded some information to us to look over.
yeah.
And I think originally that was drawn from Mr.
I don't believe I have.
I think it came from Shannon's contact. What you
Or was that, no, I thought it was from Mr.
It was, yeah, Michael George.
Mike
Oh,
George.
that was the quick one.
That's
an email. The
Right.
beekeeper I know, each county has their own.
That's quite up.
So
I
probably
can't believe I didn't
Mass
bring that
have-
Ohio has something.
Ohio has one,
Yes. And then each county has one.
Right.
Annabelle, anything else?
Yeah, I have more, I somehow misplaced my other section, getting into the most exciting part of the evening.
That's all I have. What we're talking about.
Let me find my. What page does that next section start? For some reason, when I've got my hand, I'm ending with page 13, okay. About it there. 14.
Last one.
18606 is the last section.
So,
That was the penalty section.
Yeah.
and you know you'll have to have two separate ordinances when you get to that point. Change the subdivision regulations, so there has to be a separate ordinance for that.
And
Well,
with the
my whole
enforcement
section
code, there
on
may
the
be,
vehicle.
there may be more than that.
Right, because we're changing the, you know, the definitions.
My whole section is for the vehicle. What page is it talking about the vehicle?
The vehicle was under, the junk vehicles were under,
It's 118204. G.
Current code.
yep. And that's where I was saying that we could do a G or an H provision, or another provision talking about the vehicles in the driveway.
Yeah, well, one thing that I think probably should totally come out of that section, and I'm still looking for it, is the part that says cars 3 years. The age of the car, I don't think the age of the car has absolutely.
We already talked about that last meeting.
But
I thought you just upped the number of years.
We're getting rid of the age.
Yeah, we don't need
I
the,
apologize.
we don't need the age criteria. With the other provisions under there, we don't need the age criteria.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then as far as adding, that's where we could add the section regarding, and I guess Annabelle, and for everybody's discussion here, Annabelle, you raised the issue about boats and driveways and things
Yeah.
like that. We can put it in this section, but what are your thoughts on it, I guess?
Well, I mean, that's an issue that has come up several times since I've been here over the years, especially number one, now people park anything on the street, that's the police department. But they park a boat in their driveway and it sits there for, I think, longer than 3 days or something, then
That was supposed to
it's
go.
gotta go. That, or a trailer with a boat on it or something.
I just wondered if I.
And if they have it in
That
their
was supposed
drive,
to
which
go.
sometimes we understand that people do that, they pull them up to clean them or do things with them, that's happened a few times. It just has to be up far enough from, so that people still have the use of the sidewalk and the right of way, because that's again a police issue if they block the sidewalk, but.
And that's already in there. That's not,
As far as obstructions of,
yeah.
yeah.
But
and that's
this
in our
would be
general
different
ordinances.
because we do have a boat here and it says no more than 30 days. So
Yeah,
we're-
I don't think,
Portable storage units.
if anybody had a boat stored in their driveway for 30 days, my son would probably ring off the hook. I mean,
Are there,
that's-
is there a parking restriction elsewhere in our code? that addresses commercial vehicles, motorhomes, trailers.
On the street?
Yeah.
Can't park it on the street.
Not on the street.
I think if it were there, maybe less than 24 hours, nothing would happen, but if it's something that's
Right.
2 or 3 days, then I have called the police department to complain about things that I see that happen.
There aren't other sections that deal with driveways though, because that wouldn't be something that would impede the public right of way.
So we can take that language and incorporate into this.
Can I interrupt?
Or, just a second. Sure. This section here is supposed to go under.
Yep, and I made a note of it.
Maintenance premises.
Is this section also, the G, gonna remove the word more than one, or more than? Because we're getting rid of the 3-year thing.
Oh.
What section?
The same section about junk vehicles, G.
We were saying before that if it has to meet more than one of the following criteria, but because we're
Taking out
taking out
the age, it
Means
should
any
just
of the
be
following.
mean any of the following.
Personally, if you read what's in our current code, the way it's worded, pretty plain and simple. Sometimes the more words you use, the harder it is for most people to understand, or you just it gets lost.
Doug, can you remember your thought before
Yes.
I open it up?
Yeah.
Just-
Just real quick, so tonight's supposed to be the public hearing and the first reading of this?
It's not a reading, just a recommendation to council.
So it's just public hearing?
Just public hearing, feedback.
Okay, because I mean, it seems like it's really not ready to be brought to that point yet. I mean, there's a lot of changes that Annabelle's brought up already that really aren't warranted for open comment yet, because there's changes that you're already making to what I know I have.
Well, I think it's always open for open comment. I mean, we're at a point where there's considerable structure to what we've got, and so I think it's a fair time to have open comment rather than, I mean, but certainly it's not, and this is why we do it, this is why we have the public meeting on it, and this is why we open it up for comment, because we don't want to come down with just a final version and say, okay, we're having a meeting on this, is what we're doing. We'd like to have the public comment so everybody can offer their 2 cents, and if there's other kinks in this, I mean, this is a pretty comprehensive thing that we spent about a year working on. And so, now's the time if people have comments and concerns or issues or things that they want to add or take away, this is the time to do it.
Once we work through the information that Annabelle's gone through, comparing all the code sections, as well as the comments we gathered tonight, we'll compile those into another document, and we'll probably end up having, we will have another hearing later.
Okay.
To get some final feedback based on some of the considerations we've given public comments and our changes as well. That
Okay.
make sense?
I was just under the impression that it was like close to being
It is.
brought forward to
It is close,
council.
considering
We've been working on it for a year, so
The-
closer now than we were a year ago.
We're interested in getting some feedback and trying to incorporate some other comments.
Okay.
When is the appropriate time to offer feedback? Is that going to be at the end when you finish the administrative? Oh, thank you.
Is that all you had, Annabelle?
That's all I have right now. I'm sure that we will have more later, once we.
Does anybody on the commission have any more comments right now? Well, at this time, I will open up the public meeting. There is a sign-in sheet up here. If you'd like to speak, I ask that you sign in. You don't have to do so. I'm going to go down the list and call the names off and let the people come up and speak as to what they want to. I do have sheets here as well. If you'd like to fill these out in addition to your comments or in lieu of getting up and speaking, you can do so. So I'll put these up here. Does anybody else wish to sign in that hasn't? Yep. There you go. Thank you. Sure. on the list is Mr. John Rucker.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. First off, I would like to thank you guys for all the hard work you guys have put into this. I understand reading this, that you guys have put in a lot of work on this, and we do appreciate it. Reading through it, I did have a couple of concerns. I think some other people I've talked to have had some concerns. I'm just going to touch real quick on them. I won't be long. I have to go pick my wife back up in the ER, so who would have been here. First off, 118204, Section D, where it's listing the things that can be in the yards and whatnot. It lists logs. I mean, a literal reading of that could be construed to outlaw firewood. So I don't know if there's a way to specify the difference between the two. Let's see. Okay, you guys already addressed the junk vehicles. Sorry. Okay. 118604, Section A, 1B, where it lists noxious weeds. Dandelions are listed. I've read a lot of stuff trying to figure this out, and I can't find dandelions listed as a noxious weed. Basically, by definition, a noxious weed is something that's injurious or harmful to livestock or people, whatever. So, I mean, I know people don't like dandelions in their yards, but at the same time, I eat dandelions, I make wine with dandelions. I mean, so.
Okay.
And paragraph C there, under the same section, where it talks about the peelings of vegetables or fruits. That could, my concern is that could almost be construed as banning composting. I mean, because that's what I compost, or vegetables, peelings and things like that. And then finally, subject near and dear to my heart, the animals. As far as chickens go, I know you guys all know I have chickens, and I accidentally have a rooster, and now thanks to ASE, I now have 2 roosters, which will soon be 1 rooster again. But they have a hard time sexing chickens, I think. So anyway, and I spoke with Shannon and Colleen in the past about this. By ORC, when you buy chickens, you have to buy a minimum of 6. You can buy 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever, but you have to buy 6. So if you're replacing your chickens every other year, basically, you're going to have 12 chickens for a period of time. So that's the 6 chicken limit's going to, I see where that can cause some problems down the road with that overlap. Let's see. The 10 square feet of area for each bird, all the stuff that I've read on poultry, and I've read a good bit, actually says that their requirement's only about 2 feet per bird. I mean, obviously mine have a lot more than that, but still, that's just something else to keep in mind. And then finally, the bees. I know you guys have the printout from Rod, and I really like, the more I read that, the more I liked it, because it actually allows people with smaller lots to be able to have bees. And I think I think most people are going to agree with me. We do need bees. We need bees in the state. Bees are and if we have people that are willing to husband those bees and take care of them and raise them properly, the state has inspection program that you have to register with them. They send a apiary inspector out to check out all the bees. Responsible beekeepers, I think we need more of those. And the 8,700 square feet is really going to preclude, I think, a number of lots. I mean, that's 87 by, that's almost 100 by 100. That's a decent sized lot. So that's really all I have. I thank you guys. Thanks for your time. And I have.
We have the G section, so yeah, we're going to evaluate that some more.
And if you guys have any questions about it, please feel free to give me a call.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. I neglected to do so before I called Mr. Rucker. I asked that you try to keep your comments to about 3 minutes so we can try and get through this in a timely manner. And like I said, there are sheets up here that if we don't get to you, or if you want to provide some more feedback, we welcome that. Next person is Carla Holder. Holden, is that correct?
Yeah. So I know you guys addressed a good point already with the junk cars, but I'm already here. I might as well kind of state my piece and be out the door. I have a 16-year-old car. I've invested hundreds of man hours restoring this car, thousands of dollars into it. It is near mint condition. It is considered one of your junk cars. It's insulting.
Not anymore.
Well, I mean, you guys see it. It sits in the winter. It sits more than 30 days. I drain it of almost all the gas. It has enough gas to get me to the gas station when the winter is over, and then I can drive it again. I'm not going to take my thousands of dollars and move it in the winter. I'm not. Because in the end, somebody's going to hit it. I know there's several other people that restore vehicles like this, and for it to be labeled as a junk car, I think that's insulting. I also think that something that you guys should look into is the wording on that. There are folks who have boats that are family heirlooms. They're working on restoring them. Again, it's a junk vehicle. The elderly, they can't get out, they can't afford, they're on a fixed income, they can't afford these vehicles that are nice, that are newer. Again, they don't go out very often. It's a junk vehicle. I think something should really be looked into as to the time frame that these vehicles are allowed to sit. Because, again, with the weather season that we have with elderly, I mean, we have an elderly community. They have to be thought of in this. That's kind of all I have to say.
So your comments pertain to the 30-day.
Yeah, I mean, the 30, and then on top of that, honestly, that Camaro that I have, I've spent so much money in it, but, I mean, it just had to sit for 2 months, so I could figure out a way to get under it and replace the starter. I mean, it's an older car. I understand that this comes with maintenance, it comes with a lot of time and love, but if I can't get a jack stand to get under it and replace it for 2 months, because I don't have the extra spare money to do that, I've already invested in, buying a $120 part. I have a friend who's gonna let me use her jack stand. It would be stupid of me to go out and blow money that could go into my child's mouth just because my car can't get up and move in 30 days. So, I have a problem with that, and then I just think the wording on it is kind of crass. It really should be kind of looked into and maybe worded a little bit differently.
You don't like the definition of junk?
I don't. I think the definition of junk is terrible.
Unfortunately, the reason I say that is, and I understand, it's unfortunate, but that's the way generally Ohio law, that's a category that is kind of in the legal parlance of zoning law, that they call it junk law vehicles, and the statewide, that's the way it's referenced.
Well, and I completely even understand. I get it. I don't want somebody next door to me having a car with 4 flat tires and it's missing its window.
That's what it's for.
Right, and I understand that,
Written that way.
but at the same point in time, if you notice my car is sitting there for, let's say, more than 30 days, and you call it in, now somebody says, no, just ignore it, that car's sitting for the winter, you're now breaking the law you just wrote.
Oh,
So,
can I say something? Number one, our current code does not read like that.
right.
And the most important thing is that you have a licensed vehicle with the current registration and insurance, and that it runs. Those are the top 2 things that will, if you have, the other day, a wrecked vehicle sitting in your drive, and it sits there for too long, then you're gonna have to move it.
Absolutely, and I
But,
understand.
yeah.
Yeah, and I
get that
totally
too,
do,
yeah.
I do understand.
My car would be a junk vehicle too.
Exactly, and I just think it needs to be looked at a little bit differently.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
what we're
it
doing.
needs to be worded a
Yeah.
little bit differently, especially on the time frame with the cars that, people with sports cars, they don't take them out in the winter if they can. So it's not smart.
Can I ask where you usually park?
Currently, I do park off the side because we just moved, so we got an off-street parking location.
Okay.
But for several years, my car would park in front of our home, and it would be technically considered by the road.
Okay.
That's kind of the biggest concern that I have with that. This car is not stored. I do not have a garage. I'm not blessed enough to have a garage, but I spend a lot of time maintaining this vehicle. So,
And again, and one of the things, and we went through this, I mean, this is one of the provisions we spent a bit of time on, because it's, you know, there's two things that we have to do. We have to give notice to the public so they understand what's a violation, what isn't a violation, and we have to have something adequate for our zoning enforcement arm of the administration to be able to know what they have to enforce, and
Yeah.
what is a violation or not. And it's difficult. The gentleman next to you said, okay, put in there that it's got no windows knocked out or whatever. The problem is once you get into that, now all of a sudden we're talking about, okay, you got 1 flat tire or 3 flat tires, 2 windows knocked out, duct tape on the car, how much rust? 75% of the vehicle rust, 25%? You know, you can go on, you know, and it's a very difficult area. And I understand, and certainly that's something we can further discuss as far as the issues that you brought up. But just to understand, it is a difficult issue. You know, one person's junk vehicle is another person's, you know, treasure.
way to work.
Right. Right.
Well, and I totally do understand that. I just think something should be put to consideration for the winter months, for when these cars are put away. For instance, the elderly community that doesn't get out much. I think that should be kind of brought to the attention and maybe worded a little bit different. Maybe put in an asterisk, hey, in the winter months, these vehicles are allowed to sit for this reason. Or if, you know, somebody's injured, that is another.
If a car would sit in the driveway for 30 days in the winter and not be moved, and it's got current plates on it,
It's not a problem.
that's not a
And
I think
problem.
that's why we
Then
left
why take
that
the
word
verbiage out?
Right.
Pardon me?
I take that verbiage out.
Yeah.
Well, and
But I don't think we want the more
I
than
don't-
one though, if it's
No.
got the extensively damaged
That's kind of
stuff.
what we're working on
So,
now.
we can tweak it to make it.
And I even have said.
I got 2 vehicles. They're both less than 15 years old.
Please do
The
better than
one
the
that
owner.
sits in my driveway most of the time has got 30,000 miles on it. It's out here in the driveway.
You got a current plate on
It's
it?
got current plates.
And you have no
Let's say you're
problem.
taking that verbiage out.
Yeah,
Taking the age out.
the age out.
The age is out.
The age is
No,
out.
no, but you just stated that the
No,
ordinance.
we're stating that if you have to have a current registration and license plate on the vehicle. That's one of the conditions. And that's what's in there.
Well, the biggest thing that kind of, I would have just ended up keeping my mouth shut and sitting down until somebody had mentioned something about, well, instead of it being, we have to meet 2 criteria because we're taking the age out, now let's only make it meet 1. That's what kind of caused a concern for me. Otherwise, I would have just said, okay, I'm good, I'm not concerned anymore. But I could totally even understand if a car met 2 of those 3 criteria now, how you guys might see it as a possible junk vehicle and want to take action. But
Okay.
I think something should be kind of, I mean, it sounds like you guys are in the works of doing something about it.
We'll look at this language some more and decide what makes sense
Okay.
with modifying the language to
I appreciate it.
to make
Thank
it
you.
reasonable. It may come down to, you know, where they're parked, to be in driveways that it's excluded or something, but we'll get to that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next person, Danielle Gaylor.
Mine was on the same lines as hers with the junk vehicles and everything, because my son was in boot camp for 8 weeks, and his car is parked in our driveway for well over 30 days. And he's currently in Virginia, and it's still parked in our driveway till he can have it at his duty station.
Mark Thompson.
My name's Mark Thompson. Linda and I live just on the east side of town, and I've been asked by a couple people to stop in. I'm a beekeeper, and have kept bees for quite a while. A couple things on there. One thing you have on there is about Africanized bees. You don't need to worry about Africanized bees north of Texas. They can't survive up here. You can have that in there, but it's not gonna happen. The other thing is, it says 2 hives, maximum. Ohio has between 20% and 100% winter loss every year. A good beekeeper is gonna have, say he starts out in the spring with 2 hives, is probably gonna have 8 to 10 going into the winter. Or he's gonna let them swarm, one or the other. So So if you have two and say, boy, all I can do is have two, and you don't split, you're gonna have swarms everywhere. So I wouldn't put a quantity on hives, in my opinion. And a friend of mine used to, he lived in Worthington and had a company called Ohio Queen Breeders, and they raised, breeder queens. He had probably, his lots maybe 40 feet wide at the most. He had over 100 hives. Nobody bothered him, but he had a fence. Great, that's, all that other wording is great, because bees have to come in, and if you don't have a, barrier or something for them to fly over, they come in low. But, if they have a barrier to come up over and go down, that's fine. I have 8 hives right now, and more hives not here. But there's no way to control how, they're like rats, in the spring and summer. So, if you're gonna split hives off, which is the correct thing to do, you're always going to increase. So I don't know how you could ever contain it to 2 hives and be a good beekeeper.
What do you think is the minimum number that's reasonable for
Minimum?
small village farms?
Minimum
Yeah.
or maximum?
Minimum.
I don't
The
know.
minimum number that you would need to have healthy hives.
Oh, well, somebody can have 1 or 2, buy 1 or 2, and most people lose their bees in the winter, here. But, say they buy 2 packages in the spring, and they normally get them around April. The minimum, you could have is 1 or 2 hives. But, if I bought 2 packages in the spring, I'll have 8 by August or July. Then you don't split anymore. Okay.
So do you think the minimum number would be 8 to maintain healthy hives year-round?
Yeah, the minimum, that number, I don't think you can have if a person is a good beekeeper, you're never gonna have an issue with quantity.
But
Yeah.
I guess we have to think of every resident that owns property in the village wants to have 8 hives on their yard, and what is that gonna do to?
It's gonna be a great thing. Well, the thing is, you can't put, I don't know how you can put a quantity, because I can have 2 hives, I'll let them swarm every, 3-4 weeks. You'll never know it, but there'll be swarms all over the neighborhood. Okay, so people are gonna be calling up wondering why there's a swarm on their
But if
porch.
somebody has 2 hives and lets them swarm, and then we have,
They're gonna
maybe a
swarm at least 3 to
15 hive limit, that swarm would be a lot
Well,
bigger.
no,
so-
what I'm saying is somebody that has 100 hives are gonna keep up with they're either gonna catch their swarms, manage their hives and split them. A hive swarms because they're out of room. And bees, are all about numbers, and they're all about, increasing, going out and making another hive, okay? So if they're gonna end up in trees, a hole in a tree, they're gonna end up everywhere. So, they're gonna split, 3 or 4 times. Now, the early ones that split off, don't forget, they're splitting too. So those swarms that split in May are gonna split another 2 times. So, saying 1 or 2 hives, those turn into, and then you're gonna have a big loss again every winter. That's the way it happens. But I don't understand how you can really put a quantity on, when you say minimum, what is the minimum? Like I said, I can turn 2 into 20, easy, in the summer. And then come up, the next year with, 5 or 6 if it's a bad winter, something like that. Or you can sell them off or do whatever. But I just don't know how. I understand your idea, because what if every beekeeper, nobody's gonna put that much work into them, to have that many. So I agree with you.
Yeah, I think we need to have a maximum, right?
No, because that's what I'm saying, a
Yeah.
beekeeper is not going to keep, nobody's going to keep 20 hives. But, a really, really good beekeeper could have 100 and not much more room than this, and you'll never know it. But he's not going to let them swarm, or he or she, they're not gonna let them swarm, they're not gonna, they're gonna manage them. So I don't know how you can really set a quantity, because somebody that's just playing with them doesn't want any more than 2 or 3, and they're the ones that are a problem. Because those are gonna swarm, they forget about them, and the ones with a lot of bees, are your least of your worries. The ones with a few are the ones that really are not taking care of them. Does that make sense?
So if I understand what you're saying, just so I can, I'm not a beekeeper, but so I understand what you're saying is that if you put too low of a limit, you're creating swarming problems.
Yes.
And you're suggesting that we need probably not to have any limit. But
Nobody's going to set 100 hives in their backyard unless they're a professional person, and that professional person is not going to be a problem. Does that make sense?
Franklin County's, Rod from COBA called me and sent me Franklin County's. They allow 2 hives per quarter acre.
What's a quarter? I
1
live on-
quarter acre or less, 2 colonies. I assume a colony is the same thing as a hive.
Correct.
More than 1 quarter acre, but less than 1/2 acre, 4 colonies. And you have to have more than a 1/2 acre to have 6 colonies.
And that, and that doesn't sound bad,
That's what the Central Hive President.
And we live on
So ours is
170.
actually
What's our-
2 per
I'm trying to do the
8,700
math.
square feet is actually more than 2 per 1 quarter acre, because a quarter acre is a quarter of 43,560 square feet, so slightly over 10,000, almost 11,000 square feet. We're allowing 2 per 8,700 square feet, so we're actually better than what Franklin County
Maybe at
proposes.
2 per 8,700 square foot, and if you have 40,000, if you had an acre, then you could have more. But I think, at least change that 2 to 4, because even if somebody starts out with 1 or 2 packages,
Okay, I think the way we have it is no beehives are permitted on a lot less than 8,700 square
80,
feet.
yeah.
And so basically what you're suggesting is maybe we change out the lot, we shall change the language to something to the effect of maximum per 8,700 square feet is 2 beehives, and then for every 8,700 square feet, you can double it and have 2 more, or 2 per every 8,700 square feet.
And that's what we have ordered.
What's that?
Isn't that what we have ordered?
Now, the way we have it worded, it says no lot may have more than 2 beehives, period. No beehives are permitted on a lot of less than 8,700 square feet.
Okay.
and if you wanted a minimum for that 87, I'd still change it to 4, because a 1 beehive owner is still gonna have 4 in the late. Does that make sense? And if they don't, they're just gonna let them go, versus getting in trouble. Not that you have that much choice, but, management is, does that make sense, though? If you had a minimum of, or maximum of 4 per 8,700 square feet, they're gonna probably come out in the spring with 1 or 2.
Okay. So would you agree if going with 8,700 4 per 8,700 square feet, and then each time you double that 800,
2 more.
Yeah, add 2 more? So like if you had 17,400 square feet, you could have 6 hives.
Right, and 40,000, say you lived on an acre, you
Right.
could have 8 hives, basically.
Okay.
And see, if you doubled that to 4, somebody on an acre could have 32 hives. And that's still not that much.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for the comments. Next I have Barb Sullivan.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was on this 1182.04 on maintenance of premises. I live on strictly Social Security, and I have problems with my home. Part of it's cited and part of it's not. I don't have the money to get all that taken care of. I mean, I'm struggling the way it is. I've got a part-time job just to meet my bills.
Okay.
And that kind of, I've got a big barn, everybody knows, I think everybody knows where I live, on North Chillicothe.
Name 204.
And I can't, when my husband was living, we had talked about tearing it down and putting up a garage, and we were told that if we tore that down, we couldn't put a new garage up because we didn't have enough to get away from the neighbor's property.
It
So
would
we,
involve a variance.
Right.
Pardon
It'd
me?
involve a variance. You'd have to get a variance.
Yeah. So it's still there. Now I'm a widow. I don't know which way to turn.
So what, you're saying that you have problems with your properties. What are your compliance issues with what's written in the code now?
The thing here where it said, to keep the broken glass and all that, there is windows in it,
Mhm.
and it does have broken glass.
Okay.
We use one part of it to put our cars in. And we try to keep everything clean around it. But if I'm gonna keep all this done, I don't know how I'm gonna do it. I mean, I make less than $20,000 a year. And there's no way that I can, we ran out of shingles to finish my house. And it needs new windows. I don't have money for that. And I can't seem to get any help with it. We have traced the garage back to where it used to be a livery stable. And so we really didn't want to tear it down, but we also wanted a new garage. But when we were told we couldn't build one, we kept this one. So I don't know, if I'm going to be in violation of this stuff, I don't know what to do with it.
Okay. Thank you. Next person on the list, I can't make out the last name here. It's John, 828 West Main Street.
It's Doig, D-O-I-G.
D-O-I-G?
Yeah. I think what I wanted to talk about has been pretty well covered,
What
but it
was it,
seems
sir?
to be double talked.
Was it cars? Okay.
Those are cars.
Is that 30-day parking?
Yeah,
Okay.
because you can't include the 30-day parking if all you're gonna base it on is registered and insured.
Okay.
What we do, turn it around each month. We take pictures with the date on so that we can see that it's been done.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll look at that language some more.
If it's in the winter, I don't drive this thing. It's 13 years old and got 30,000 miles on
Yeah.
it.
That's part of the problem when we start making a change to a section that impacts additional parts, and so there's more to take into account there. So, yes, we'll look at that some more. Thank you. Antoinette Arnold?
Oh, that's me.
Okay.
I don't know how this changes what's existing in the code, and so my concern mostly was with the 118604, which has to do with, and also with the dandelions, which was also addressed. Identifying noxious things such as poison ivy is a whole different thing as dandelions, in my opinion. So, but that one, your grass being 8 inches, that to me seems like, I can get that in a week, sometimes in the spring. That seems a little high to be in violation of a code, but again, I don't know what's existing. And then I also, the way I read it, are we now making not mowing your lawn and having weeds a criminal offense because it's now a misdemeanor?
It always has been.
Really? Okay, I find that wrong personally, so.
Anywhere.
I just find it wrong. I mean, people are busy. Again, we have senior citizens that may not be able to do it or afford to have someone else do it. I personally find it wrong. I find that offensive as well.
Well, and I can bring this up because as an attorney who defends villages and municipalities and these types of and lawsuits that are brought over these issues, number one, there is a time for compliance. So if grass grows 8 inches and say, hey, it looks like it's getting, if Annabelle comes over to your house and says, look, your grass is getting kind of high, we need you to cut it, there's a time period for compliance, which means that probably if it grew 8 inches in a week and you still had another week to get it, it would be 16 inches or something. So, there's some built-in reason within this. The problem is that if you have people, the code, the reason that you have criminal provisions in here is because there are people that flat out refuse to cooperate, and there is no stick big enough to make them do it. There are individuals who will refuse to come into compliance. And our only option is, we're gonna take our manpower and our individuals and make them go out and mow the lawn for you, and then we charge it back on your tax lien. And it keeps going and going, and there are properties, and there have been in the past, where they're comfortable just having you do the lawn. I mean, all of a sudden, it's the Plain City Lawn Care Service. And it keeps getting added to the auditor tax lien. And so, and I've dealt with it. I've dealt with very extreme examples of this, where a person has been charged criminally. but it's only after, all possible opportunities have been exhausted. That criminal provision is in there to say, look, we've done absolutely everything we can within reason to give you an opportunity to come into compliance, and you've just thumbed your nose at us, and so now we have to take out the big stick and use it. So I don't, I understand, because it seems like a harsh thing, yeah, I'm gonna go to jail over not cutting my grass. But you're going to jail over refusing to cut your grass, and when you're being told to come into compliance, telling them, no, I'm not gonna do it, and I am not gonna comply with the law. That's what you're going to jail for. It's almost like a contempt. You're going to jail over contempt of the law, not so much for having the grass 8 inches.
Okay, 'cause the way I read it, you were given 5 days notice, and then without complying, it was a misdemeanor, and for every additional day, it was another misdemeanor. And so I was concerned about that. It seems excessive, and it doesn't sound like the type of community that I moved to. So again, I don't know what exists in the law, and I admit that.
Our habit is to send out a nice, just a friendly reminder, say, and it basically says, oh, you need to please mow your yard or something. Not a letter, it's just a form thing. I would say 90% of the time that works. The problem is if you live next door to a house that was abandoned or the bank took over, we need those laws in place so that we can protect you, because sometimes that's when the village has to go in a lot of times and mow, and we need a recourse to go back and collect.
And if I may speak on behalf of this, actually our new home that we just moved to, the person who owns the lot behind us, for 2 months didn't touch it. It was to the point where it was borderline dangerous. There are giant holes back there. I have a 4-year-old, well, he's 5 now, but he would have disappeared. I wouldn't have seen him. He would have needed a machete to get out of there. With that being said, snakes and other things lurk in there. Again, it's dangerous.
Where do you live?
It's gone now, so
Okay.
it's been addressed.
I'm gonna be on that tomorrow.
Yeah, it has been addressed. They came out, they took care of it. I laughed several times when he kept killing his lawnmower over it. But he did address it. But I think it's more or less a safety thing, because again, there's so many things that can lurk in there, so.
Well, my concern, I don't want to keep talking, but my concern again is what's written and what actually happens. And
Right.
it seems the same with your car thing. What is
Yeah.
written is very clearly, in my opinion,
Absolutely.
harsh and,
Absolutely.
can be misapplied,
Right,
right? But what they're actually saying doesn't seem that way.
right.
So my concern was what was
And
actually.
I was concerned with it too. I agree with you on that, so.
Thank you. Last name I have on the list is Doug Saxon.
If I could just follow up on that, and I really agree to the height and of the grass and everything like that, right? And I can't imagine any responsible adult needs to be pleasantly reminded they need to cut their yard. They just shouldn't be.
I agree.
They shouldn't
I
be.
agree.
So I
Unfortunately,
would
that's
say,
not the
but
case.
if there's people here that are not cutting their grass, then it's a blatant choice to not do so, or they're potentially incapable of doing so. Something has happened, right? So to put in there, again, 8 inches, that seems pretty low to say, well, we're gonna remind you to cut your grass. Well, yeah, I'm sure me and half the town needs to cut the grass because it's been raining, right? So that's where I agree. The wording that's in there seems a little harsh, because I think most reasonable people are going to cut their grass. The people that you say you're having troubles with, that you end up in court, and the reason that these laws have to be in place, are doing it for a much longer period of time. And they're not gonna respond to, so I would be pretty offended if I got, and I like Annabelle, but if I got a nice little note from Annabelle that said, hey, hon, you need to cut your grass. Yeah. And as soon as I get a chance to, I will.
You have to use common sense. I don't think there's gonna be any zoning inspector. I ride around the village every day, except Fridays. But I think to myself too, it's been raining a lot, common sense has to come into play.
Mhm.
So, and mainly, you have to realize that law is there to protect the residents more than it is to punish the guy whose lawnmower is broken. It's something that goes,
Or leg, or whatever the case may be. There's
well,
generally.
or whatever. If that
there's a-
happened, then they call the office and say, you know, I broke my leg, and you say, okay.
There's generally a reason. So that's what I have with that. Where can I get a copy of the current 1182 code? Like what has not been,
The existing one, it's in effect right now.
Online.
Just go online.
Online?
Go to
On the
Village of
village's
Plain City.
website.
because I think that was, to your point too, I would like to see what's on versus what's being changed. Because some of this stuff may have been on the books for a while. That doesn't mean it needs to stay in, and it may not make sense either, but.
And that's something that Annabelle has been going through to find people back and
Yeah.
forth between the two.
And I'll bring everybody's attention to 118208. And again, like I was talking in the beginning when we were talking with Annabelle, that we're gonna consolidate the enforcement provisions for these, so that there's one enforcement provision for any one of these subsections. But one of the things I draw the attention to, in the event that weather or other unforeseen circumstances prevent correcting or abating the violation, the village zoning inspector may extend the time set forth therein. That's the discretion, we're gonna be reasonable, we're gonna use common sense. That's why we have that in there. But we do have to have the kind of drop dead harsh stuff in there for the people that just don't wanna cooperate. Or the people, or the, sometimes nudge the banks to take over, to take care of their property that they're not paying attention to.
And that's why it seems inconsistent at times, is we try to give some discretion, because she does know who those people, a lot of those people are, the elderly, or those that she talks to personally, and they go, well, my thing's broken down, but I'll get to it next week.
One thing that, so in the definitions, you had said that you were gonna strike that, all of that. I would suggest at least leaving the words themselves there, and then to say that their definitions could be found in 113702.
Where are you, what section are you on?
The very front page 3 of 118201 definitions.
Okay, yeah, we're taking those out.
But I think the words themselves that you're defining should be left in there.
There's gonna be a definition.
It says C section 113702. Because that's the definition
It'll
section.
refer you back.
It'll refer you to where to look.
Right. The copy I have has everything stricken through, even the words themselves.
Right.
So if you strike the word, how do you know?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So the words that are being defined in 113702 should still be listed.
Yep.
For these definitions, see 113702. So then on the next page, 118203, so it says the exterior condition of all building structures on any premises shall be maintained so the appearance therefore reflects the level of maintenance in keeping with the standards of the village. So what really does that refer to? The standards of the village, is that, because that's kind of vague talk?
Well, that's why we have 118204 talking about maintenance of premises and talking about blighting influences, which are also discussed in here under the other sections.
Okay. And then, so on to that, 118204, and one of the things it says, exterior, other structures on the premises need to be in good repair, which again is pretty vague, so it leaves it fairly open to discretion. And who then decides what's good and what's bad? Again, it's kind of going to the junk vehicle, right? Those are in extreme cases of junk cars that we want to prohibit, not necessarily some cars that haven't been moved, that meet all these other requirements. When you say that it's in good condition, I think that's pretty open for discretion.
Well, and it is, and the problem is you can go on indefinitely trying to define
Sure.
something. And so you do have to leave it up to the discretion, and certainly there's an appellate process if you disagree with it, and that's why the zoning inspector has to use common sense, because if it's something that plainly, that a reasonable person, because that's gonna be the standard, any court or any appellate level of review is gonna apply, it's gonna be what a reasonable person would consider good repair. And again, at some point, it's very difficult to try to mold, and you can't come up with a finite definition of something. You can only try to work or base it upon common knowledge, common usage, and what a reasonable person would consider to be, in this case, good repair.
All right.
So, yeah, it's not an easy thing to do, but that we do try to rely on common sense, and if something is outrageous, or if the zoning inspector does something that's inappropriate, or extreme, goes beyond her authority, then there's appellate review process, and ultimately you can be in front of a court saying, and the court can say, you know what, she or he exceeded their authority, and this is beyond, this was in good repair, and claiming that it was, so.
Fair enough.
And our current 1183 is very vague and just says good repair, but this goes on further. If you read further in, it says all surfaces shall be maintained free of broken glass, blah, 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 blah,
Yes.
blah. And then it talks further detail of canopies, marquees, and signs, and how you can't have any evidence of weathering, rotting, ripping, etc. So this
And-
definitely goes a little bit above what our current.
And it does, and I mean, the wording after that seems great, but to put in there in good repair, and then to go into more detail, it almost seems to me like you could just leave out in good repair, because you're explaining after that what ill repair, or, does that make sense?
Yeah, but I think really you're just giving examples. Of
Yeah,
what-
I think good repair is
All right.
probably a standard.
So, on to the portable storage, which is the next page.
What section, please?
It's the very next page, page 5 would be 118204 F1. It says that there's no more than one.
That was something that Annabelle and I talked about. And I don't think we talked about it tonight, but I had it marked here. Yeah, F1, just F1, not
Yeah.
F.
One portable storage unit at a time?
Yeah.
Yeah, and part of that, I had number 4, that's also covered in the subdivision regs on the,
And 1125.
but then I thought if someone has their kitchen redone, they may have to have that in there
Right.
on the residential.
So, it's possible one is going to be removed,
That's what Annabelle.
or at least being discussed. I mean, because it seems like no more than one seems to be an unreasonable limit. I mean,
Well, I think there should be a limitation of some sort.
And
I
you
mean,
can
don't-
always get a
you don't-
BZA if you need to.
You don't want to have somebody that has 10 storage units on the property. 10.
well, I agree, but these are temporary structures that it already says they're not allowed to be there for more than 30 consecutive days anyways. So even if they have 10, they'll only be there for a month, and then they're supposed to be gone.
And you think somebody's neighbor is going to be happy seeing 10 portable storage units lined up in front of the house
But
next
you
door?
can't, I mean, but if you need, what if you need them?
If you get a BZA and you tell the BZA why you need them,
You need
you
10.
demonstrate a hardship.
Well, and I agreed, I used 10 because that was underused, but we're saying one, no more than one, so what if you have 2? Right?
Yeah, and I think that's not reasonable to discuss that. I think that there is a reasonable number that ordinarily somebody may need to have.
If you would need to, say if you were redoing your kitchen and you had to have a portable storage unit to store your kitchen stuff in, and if you had 2 and came, you probably granted permission. But the idea of people being allowed just to put up storage units, and I'm not talking accessory building, this is a portable, like a pod or
Yeah.
something, then
And in that same section, number 3, it seems the excessive requirement to have the resident be responsible for someone else's storage unit being free from rust, peeling paint, and other visible forms of deterioration,
it's kind of thing.
right? Because if I call Pods or whomever, and I say, hey, I need one, because I'm only allowed to have one, and they bring it out and it's beat up, banged up, needs repainted, well, I can't have that. It's against our zoning code. I need a new one. Right, I'm gonna be charged, so I think it's a little bit separate. And under G, there was a section that was added, 6. And,
That's gonna be moved.
okay,
Yeah, that would be
That's
wrong
moved
place.
to
Is it wrong?
another
Okay.
place.
because that's, yeah.
Yeah, that one's gonna be H.
1182.04.
Okay. And so with that, are we, is that really, is that an issue though?
Oh, what's listed there?
Yeah.
Yes, it
Hanging
has
on.
been in the past.
Certainly is.
That's why it was added in the code to begin with.
Throughout the village, there's an issue.
I wouldn't say throughout the village, no, but it is in the current code.
Well, but again, and that's something that, where I say even it's something that's in the code currently.
It's an issue.
And realize it says on the front porches, balconies, that kind of thing. It doesn't say to dry them. It's just. the
That's why
reason
someone
it's
would
put-
hang them, I would imagine,
Was
would
that-
be to dry. I would imagine that's why they're being hung out, is to dry.
You can put them on your, hang them in your backyard.
Well, if you don't have a backyard. Yeah, and then that's what I was gonna get
Apply
to,
it
is
to the
that, that
BZA.
seems to be
Ask
targeting
permission.
a specific area. It seems to be targeting a specific area.
Okay.
Yep.
Under 118205B, where it says that village engineer, county building department, or applicable, will be notified to provide a professional opinion at the owner's cost. So if that comes down to it not being at a level of disrepair that it's okay, that it's allowable by the engineer, okay, or the county building department, should it be added in there that the homeowner would be reimbursed for that cost? So let's say something on my property is not where it needs to be, and I say, well, okay, I think it is, well, fine, then we get the county involved, and the county comes in, they go, yeah, that's fine. But I had to pay for that service.
I think what this is saying is that if.
This is for structural issues.
Yeah, but if the village, if the county engineer comes in and says, I don't think that this, what this is saying is they're coming, the county engineer is coming in and saying that your building is not in good repair or not structurally sound.
Well, no, this says that they'll be called in at the owner's expense. Like, it goes, it's a step beyond that argument of your property is in need of structural repair. I don't believe it is. Well, we'll call the county in and you will pay for that. Okay, then the county comes in and says, well, no, you know what, it isn't, it's fine. Would I, as a homeowner, be reimbursed for those costs?
And then we go to the appeal process.
You would have to appeal something that I was ultimately ended up being wrongfully charged for. We can't just put in the code that I would be reimbursed for the money that I was put out. Oh, yeah, plus the fee to go to BZA. And I'm not looking for, these are, not looking for answers right now, these are things that I had concerns with as I read it.
I guess just realistically, looking at this, if something were in such disrepair that an engineer or a building department will call in to look at it, chances are that they're going to give an evaluation that says that it's okay is very unlikely.
Yeah, as it stands now, we
Especially
can.
the county engineer as well.
Right. We contract with the county engineer. So in an instance such as this, if it's called into question, in this instance with Annabelle is not going to make a determination whether it's in structural repair or not. That's not her job. She doesn't handle structural issues. She'll call the county engineer who we contract with. They're going to come down, take a look at it and say, I don't think it's in good repair. Or they'll say, I think it is in good repair. Either way.
And you're probably not gonna get a bill for it.
Right.
It's
we're
their
already-
opinion, it's certainly.
It's the initial opinion.
Right. I'm an engineer, I do that, I'm a structural guy. I've been called out to do that before.
So then, Does that make sense?
Usually there won't be an owner, it won't be a cost of the owner, unless you want to fight it and you go get another, your own engineer and say, my engineer says it is, and the county engineer, that's when you would absorb the cost, I think. I think that's what that's written at. I think that's what the intent, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Well, it's the way it's written. If necessary, in such cases where structural repair is in question, the village engineer or the county building department, whichever may be applicable, will be notified to provide a professional opinion at the owner's cost.
We can tweak that.
I think we can tweak and clarify.
Okay.
I don't think the county would ever charge the homeowner unless it got so extensive they had to do calculations to it. As you said, they're going to want to give you your opinion and look at it.
Eliminate 207.
Sorry, just let me ask you, how many more items do you have to go through? I do need to end this meeting here shortly. If you have too many more, I'll ask you to take your form and fill it out and return it to us. If you just have a couple more, we can go ahead and run through it.
Because I think most of the stuff past where I'm at, I believe, was covered. Mostly, yeah, I think I have just a couple more.
Okay. 8207?
Yeah, 8207. So, again, and this just seems kind of, and I understand why it needs to be harsh, but we're saying here if, and I'll just use me as an example, what if my off-street parking or what have you has chuckles, potholes, anything like that, and I, within given a violation, have 30 days to fix it, right? Okay, I'm not the only one in a financial situation. Our roads haven't been paved. We have potholes in our roads, and you're gonna charge a homeowner, give a homeowner 30 days to fix their property? I mean, this should also go against our own streets, alleys, things of that nature, because I know there's plenty of places throughout here that have potholes and what have you in our alleys that aren't being fixed within 30 days of someone finding it out.
Okay.
I mean, and that's, again,
Fair comment, but I mean, if they're two different issues, but I understand the comment.
yeah, the ones that are out on the public right of way should be a heck of a lot more important than the ones that are on my private property.
Well, think of a commercial parking lot too.
Yes.
Lovejoy's Plaza just became all potholes and weeds. It's a little bit different too than somebody's residential driveway.
What about this parking behind, is that yours back here?
Yeah.
So would that be something that would be considered part of this? Because, so you guys would have to address this?
No, because it's public.
Okay.
And that's what I'm saying, that's the difference is, we're being pretty tough on private property when our own public property isn't at that same level.
So would you be happy with it be about commercial rather than residential? Is that?
Well, if that's what if the intent is for commercial property, then it should be outlined as.
Well, it should be
for commercial.
both. I mean, okay. Next.
So the next would be 118604. And if we touched on it, right, the dandelion. Just want to make sure that we're going, that's going to be looked at a little bit because they're really hard to control even if you attempt to control them.
Granted, yes.
Right? And I would say, if that's something that goes in, I'd be careful. Because some of your largest offenders are the larger properties, which are the schools. So, I would be careful putting that in the law, because if you start hitting residents with that, then there better not be any in the big plots of grass. Or in the same token, what about the park? Is the public land gonna be held to the same standard?
Well, it never is, but that's just the way it is, that's the law. We're not held to the same standard, that's just the way it is. Because it's public funds that have to control everything.
But it's also private funds, it's our money that controls that.
I understand.
But, and if the money that I'm already paying can't keep the property at the level that it needs, the public property at the level it needs to be, how on earth am I gonna have enough money left over to keep my property better?
Okay.
Yeah, it almost seems in some of this that you're trying to make Plain City like a gated community. I lived in Florida just for a few months, and this was some of our rules. But we were in a gated community. This isn't a gated community, this is a farming town. We aren't Dublin or Powell or anything, we're just plain old Plain City. It's just been a very nice country place to come home to. I've lived here for 73 years, and I've never seen rules and regulations like what's printed in here. I read some of this and I was furious, and at some of it I sat there and laughed about the dandelions. I mean, to me, a dandelion, come springtime, that's the first thing I see, and I know spring is on the way.
Okay,
And,
we've already touched on the dandelion issue, we're gonna move on.
yeah.
Doug, did you have any more?
I have one last one, same section 118604, E, and that is the service fees. So, again, is there a threshold at where the point in time where you would start charging service fees? Because under some of this basically says, I'm gonna be charged again because now I'm sending someone to your house. Well, that money is already, their time is already paid
I
by the
understand,
money
but
that's
you're looking at
paid.
that, this is basically a vendor that's basically not listening. Okay, you have to notify them again and again and again.
Well-
So basically, it's a waste of services that shouldn't have to be used. Right? So that's why
Excessive.
that
And I guess
person is
that's
charged
where-
for that.
So that's where I'm saying, and I would agree, I would hope that it would be when their services have, like I said, a threshold. When it becomes excessive, then yes, I think, and I feel they should be charged for those services. But that, maybe it should say in there, excessive.
But that's hard to define too, that word excessive, who defines that?
Well, but
you
I
can
agree,
probably-
because but if you just put it, if it's not in there, it seems like if I get 2 reminders, right? Or whatever the case may be, that I could be charged for that.
But there also has to be some latitude to give the village room to work.
It's like the worst case
As far
scenario.
as what they're notifying and trying to work with the resident. And maybe the resident is, amicable at first, and, if you're trying to work through it, then all of a sudden they just become non-responsive.
Sure.
Where they moved
Again,
out and abandoned
We've
their
got to have that flexibility.
If you look at this, the idea is we're gonna put, the burden shouldn't be on everybody that's in compliance to pay for this stuff. I mean, we try to, without getting into budgetary issues and everything else, there's a certain amount of money that's out there, and we pay for standard fee, standard duties and responsibilities of people that work for the village. And if you're gonna have to pay more and have to have Annabelle doing more work on a particular property because the person is in compliance, then that really isn't her job is part of enforcement, that's her job. But if somebody's not complying because she has to continually do notices, continually do service on issues like that.
So maybe that's the words that you use.
But again,
But they might not put it in there when someone's not being compliant.
Well,
Right,
that's
this-
implicit, that's what this is, because the only way to get the notice of the service is when they're not compliant.
Yeah, that's sort of redundant if you put it in.
The burden, the idea is to put the burden on the person that's not complying.
That's when it's used.
excessive. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I know it's a vague word. It's better than not in there at all. Because this way, the way it's worded, it
seems
the
like
first time they show up, You're gonna be charged.
You can be charged extra.
Yeah.
Because you had to have that happen.
Okay.
And then my last and final comment would be, I appreciate the work that's gone into this. I know what it's been, a year process.
Probably about a year, 9 months to a year.
The only thing that's a little bit aggravating, I appreciate all the hard work. I honestly just do. The only thing that's a little bit aggravating is it doesn't seem like we've added more rules and we're not enforcing what's currently on the books.
Well, there's not a lot on the books really as far as maintenance to it, and that's part of the problem, is the way it's set up now is very vague and very hard to do enforcement on.
And if you have complaints, you should call and file a complaint. If you're aware of a violation, and you can call the zoning office and tell me what it is, and I can look into it.
Yeah, as I remember how a lot of this started was concerns, and I just remember there was one instance I remember in particular, one of the meetings, Mr. Rucker was talking about a property next to him that wasn't in compliance, and he was frustrated, and I think it got a discussion with Mr. Kennedy as to what does it take to have a building knocked down or a house knocked down or something like that, because you can sense the frustration. And when we talked to Mr. Jordan about it, one of his concerns was there wasn't enough teeth in the existing ordinances that we had. And that's really kind of, from that discussion, that's how all of this blossomed to where we're at today, to where we had to develop something more comprehensive to give more authority and more teeth to the zoning inspector to try to enforce the property maintenance code. And that's how we end up where we're at.
And we're also putting in the ability to appeal your zoning violations as well, which doesn't exist today, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I seem to remember the broken windows in the property on Main Street, that was one of the issues that kind of jumped up.
But they've always been able to appeal. That's in the code, that's always been a part of the code.
And we needed a starting point, so we found language that another entity had. And so that's why we're working through this, trying to fine tune it to fit us. So that there's stuff in here like dandelions that probably doesn't need to be here, but we're trying to sort through this language and work it out.
Mr. Saxauer was the last person I have on the list. Before we close this meeting, is there anybody else in the audience that didn't sign up that wishes to speak to anything?
I would, Leslie Perkins. I would like to add, actually, on maintenance of premises, maybe down here on D, where it starts off no furniture, something that maybe should be considered to be added would be tires.
Oh, that's somewhere in the code, yeah, you can add.
There already is, because
Somewhere,
I know
yeah.
there is a property, maybe you know about it, next to Lee's, I forget what their name is, maybe the.
The garage?
Yes.
Yeah,
The
they
property.
put them back there and they're picked up.
Those Lesnies, that's right.
Oh, that,
Because the
yeah.
lady who lives next door, I guess it's fenced, and when she's upstairs, she can see over, and I guess he has a huge swimming pool that's full of water.
We know
and-
about him.
Okay, yeah,
There's
okay.
actually, that's been dealt with in the courts, and it's
Oh,
just a
okay.
matter of us going
Yeah.
back and saying, you're non-compliant.
Yeah, it's kind of, it kind of falls under 118204D. Basically says, no junk vehicles, vehicle parts, discarded abandoned machinery, in basically in outdoor areas.
Yeah.
So tires would be parts?
Yeah.
That would fall under there? And then.
And we could add tires explicitly, it's not jumping out.
It's
not in
somewhere.
there.
Old tires are somewhere in
Yeah.
there.
Tires are a breeding
I will
ground for
find out.
mosquitoes.
Yeah,
That's a proven fact.
yeah.
So
I'm
it ought
dealing
to be
with
in
some
there
now on
somehow.
the north end of town I'm trying to get. So far, they've been stacked, they were, so I'm hoping that next case is great.
I know.
Ms. Perkins, was there anything else?
I forget who does it, it's like a beat a church type of thing.
Ms. Perkins?
It's under.
Yes.
Did you have any other comments?
The vending machines, is that gonna stay in
Vending machines is not included in this currently.
on
That'll be
number
separate.
E where it says 2 vending machines that's coming out?
Yes, that would be a separate code section later.
They
Okay.
kind of tabled vending machines
Okay.
for a while. Oh, speaking of that, real quickly, you'd asked me to ask the police department their feelings on vending machines, if they screened them. Sergeant McKee said, screening's a bad idea. If someone tries to break into them, they have no way sometimes of seeing them. That was his response.
If there's no other comments from the public, I'll close the public meeting at this time. Thanks, everybody, for the comments. If anyone wants to take a sheet, and if there's anything else that you think of later, or any other comments you come up with, want to return it to Annabelle, that would be great. We'll take all this information and assemble it together and work on modifications to the language. And then we'll schedule another public hearing once these changes are.
Is there any way to get, like, if we give you an email address, and once, like, it's cleaned up, can we get that emailed to us? So that, like, we could have a copy of it before the meeting, or do we just contact the office again?
Probably the best thing we can do is put it on the website.
Because I had,
With
like.
the draft?
Yes.
Yeah.
We can put it on the website, that way it's available to everybody, and I'm not just sending it out to individual people.
Oh, no,
That way it's
absolutely.
Not, doesn't seem unfair to anybody.
Do they understand the process once it goes from here, what happens?
Yes.
That it goes to council, they have another public hearing, they have 30 days in which that ordinance will become available to people to read before it's passed also.
Yeah, because only council can establish ordinance changes. This committee just makes recommendations to council.
But like you were saying, Dan, this is gonna be, the plan is to compile this data, continue to grind through the changes that are current, and then hold another public hearing that.
With our group.
Yes. Cool. And then after that public hearing, we'll consider if there's any more changes needed, and then from there, we'll have a meeting, and if it's ready at that point, recommend
To the council.
sending it to council. Yes.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Very good. Again, thank you for the interest, everybody, in coming. Appreciate the feedback.